I was 31 when the email landed in my inbox. Subject line, unclaimed baggage belonging to Rockford High class of 2005. No sender name, no greeting, just 3 grainy photos of a red Samsonite suitcase, duct tape wrapped around its handle, and the initials AT scrawled in black marker on a faded airline tag. I stared at it for a full minute before my brain caught up with my body's reaction. My hands were already shaking. That suitcase belonged to Ashley Thompson, my best friend from high school. She never made it back from our senior trip. None of them did. Rockford High School's small town, Northern California. Our graduating class of 23 students boarded a charter bus bound for Yosemite National Park in June 2005. It was supposed to be a 2-day farewell trip, complete with bonfire stories, hiking trails, and cheesy disposable camera photos. I didn't go. A broken ankle from a softball game 2 weeks earlier benched me. I watched them pull out of the school parking lot from my dad's pickup truck, my crutches resting against the glove box. Ashley blew me a kiss from the window. I never saw her again. No one did. The police called it a freak accident, said the bus might have veered off the mountain pass near El Portal, where the road hugs the cliff edge like a thread over a canyon. No wreckage was found, no bodies, just one tire marked near a sharp bend and a guardrail that looked slightly bent. But I always knew that wasn't enough. Not for 23 kids and 2 chaperones. And now, 10 years later, someone or something wanted me to remember. I clicked on the second photo. The suitcase was open, lying on what looked like a concrete floor. Inside, there were damp clothes, a faded Rockford High hoodie, and a binder with sparkly stickers on the cover. Ashley's handwriting danced across it, notes, doodles, a half-written letter that began with "Dear Future Me." I hadn't seen her writing in over a decade. My eyes stung. The third image was of a shipping label, Bogota, Colombia, Unclaimed Items Department. Colombia. How the hell did Ashley's suitcase end up in South America? I didn't tell anyone right away. Not my husband, not my parents, not even the few classmates I still had on Facebook. I spent 3 days rereading the email, combing through old photos of that last school year, zooming in on group pictures, trying to find anything that hinted at what had happened. That's when I decided I needed to go back to Rockford. Back to the place I'd avoided for years. Back to the school. Back to the mothers who never packed away their kids' bedrooms. Back to the shadows of a mystery that had never really been solved, only buried. Because if that suitcase was real, then someone had been lying. And I was ready to find out who. Rockford looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was just the weight of time, or maybe I'd outgrown the place emotionally long before I ever left. The cracked welcome sign still read, Rockford, a place to call home, though someone had spray-painted over the word home with regret, fitting. The main street hadn't changed much. 2 diners, a church, the post office, and the gas station where half of us used to loiter after football games, pretending we had anywhere else to be. As I pulled into the motel parking lot, I spotted a familiar silhouette, a wiry man with thinning blonde hair and an oversized sheriff's jacket. Sheriff Danner. He'd been a deputy back in 2005, the guy who told our parents, "We're doing everything we can." I don't know what I expected him to look like, but somehow his tired eyes made it feel like he never stopped searching, even if he stopped hoping. I didn't approach him, not yet. Instead, I checked in, dropped my bag, and drove straight to my childhood home. My mom still lived there, alone since Dad passed. She opened the door before I even knocked. "Jesse," she said, eyes wide with disbelief, "what are you doing here?" I hadn't told her I was coming. "Got your coffee machine working?" I asked. She hugged me so tightly I couldn't breathe, and I let her. I needed it more than I realized. Inside, the living room looked untouched, like time hadn't dared rearrange anything in her house. The same ceramic angel by the fireplace, the same family photo with Dad's crooked tie and me in braces. We sat, she made coffee, I stalled. Eventually, I pulled up the photos on my phone. This was emailed to me. She adjusted her glasses, holding the phone close. I watched her hands tremble as she scrolled, her eyes locked on Ashley's binder. "I remember that," she whispered. "She brought it to your birthday party, wrote a poem about your friendship." I nodded. I hadn't thought about that poem in years. "Where did they find it?" "Colombia." Her face went pale. She set the phone down and reached for the edge of the table, grounding herself. "I don't understand," she said. "That's impossible." I know. We were both quiet for a long time, the kind of silence where all the grief that's been hiding in the walls for 10 years decides to sit beside you. That night, I drove out to Rockford High. It was closed for the summer, but the front gate was unlocked. I parked outside and walked the path to the gymnasium, the same one where we held pep rallies and awkward school dances. The walls were now faded, the lawn overgrown. A plaque near the entrance still bore the names of the class of 2005. I ran my fingers over Ashley's. A voice behind me nearly made me jump out of my skin. "You're Jesse Reynolds, aren't you?" I turned, a man in his early 30s, messy dark hair, glasses. He looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. "Yeah," I said cautiously. "I'm Will Marsh, my sister Rachel. She was in your class. She never came back." Rachel Marsh, the quiet girl with the soft voice and messy ponytail. I remembered her smile, the kind that always seemed to apologize for existing. "I've been looking into what happened," he said, lowering his voice. "On my own, the cops gave up. Most people moved on or just wanted to, but not me." I studied him for a second. There was a manic glint in his eyes, like obsession had carved out his sleep. "And now this," he continued, "the luggage, I know about it." I froze. "How?" He smiled bitterly, "Because you weren't the only one who got an email." He pulled out his phone and opened an image. A suitcase, different from Ashley's but just as familiar. This one had a faded name tag, R. Marsh. "They're showing up," he said, "one by one." I felt my stomach twist. "They want us to find something," Will whispered, "or someone wants to be found." The next morning, I met Will at the town diner, Dottie's, still run by the same woman who wore floral aprons and called everyone Hun. It smelled like burnt toast and too much cinnamon, and I felt 15 again just being inside. We sat at a booth near the back, where the noise was quieter. Will had a spiral notebook open before I even took a sip of my coffee. Pages filled with names, arrows, flight paths, time zones. I was impressed, and also a little scared. "You've really been doing this for a while," I said. He nodded, not taking his eyes off his notes. "Since 2013. That's when I found a travel record for a man named Philip Torres, the bus driver for your class trip. The file showed a plane ticket purchased in his name to Quito, Ecuador, 5 months after the accident." I blinked. "Wait, but he was presumed dead?" "Yeah, but that ticket was never used. Canceled the day before the flight. It took me years to even get access to that record, but then I found a second one." He flipped to another page, another name I recognized. "Mrs. Carver," I whispered. He nodded. "Your math teacher, one of the chaperones. There's no record of her death because no bodies were ever recovered. But in 2009, someone using her ID applied for a temporary work visa in Belize. It was denied, but still." He let the silence do the rest. This wasn't just about luggage anymore. "What do you think happened?" I asked finally. Will leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice low. "I think they disappeared on purpose, or were made to." "That doesn't make sense. Why would they do that? They were kids, our friends." He looked at me then, really looked. Maybe it wasn't their choice. Before I could respond, someone approached our table. A woman in her 60s, neatly dressed, with tired but determined eyes. "Jesse Reynolds?" she asked gently. I stood up. "Yes, ma'am." "I'm Lorraine Bishop. My son Caleb was in your class." Caleb, star of the baseball team, couldn't do algebra to save his life, always carried gum. "I know," I said softly. She sat down beside us without waiting for an invitation. "I heard you were asking questions. That someone sent you something." I nodded. "My friend's suitcase, Ashley Thompson." Her hands tightened around her purse strap. 3 weeks ago, someone left a backpack on my porch. No note, just sitting there, zipped shut. Inside was Caleb's old Walkman, the one I gave him for his birthday in 2005. Still had the same mix CD in it, the one with Bon Jovi on repeat. Her voice cracked on the last part. Will and I exchanged a look. We hadn't heard about this. She wasn't lying. "I told the police. They said it was probably a sick prank, that someone wanted attention. But it wasn't a prank. That CD had a scratch right at the start of track 6. I remember it skipped every time he played it." She paused. "And it skipped exactly the same way when I listened to it again." A chill moved down my spine. "Someone's sending us pieces of them," I whispered. "But why?" Mrs. Bishop shook her head. I don't know, but I can tell you this, not all the parents moved on. Some of us never did. We get together once a year, quietly, talk, remember, share anything new. Can we meet them? Will asked. She hesitated. They're cautious, tired of false hope, but maybe now's the time. I walked her to her car. She handed me a small piece of paper before she left. It had an address in San Jose. They meet there this Saturday, she said. Come alone and come with proof. I watched her drive off, her taillights disappearing into the dusty morning. Proof? I asked. Will smiled, holding up a printout of the luggage email and a USB stick. I've got more than that. Flight logs, visa records, timestamped shipping receipts from Bogota. We're not just chasing rumors anymore. We were chasing something real. And someone clearly wanted us to keep going. The house was tucked behind tall hedges, just outside San Jose, a single-story home with beige siding, wind chimes on the porch, and a cracked driveway. It looked like any other house on the block, which I suppose was the point. We arrived just before dusk. Will parked a few houses down, heart pounding hard enough to make his shirt twitch. Neither of us spoke during the drive. I think we both knew, after tonight, there would be no turning back. Lorraine Bishop met us at the door. Her eyes scanned us, not for recognition, but for certainty. Then she stepped aside and let us in. The living room was quiet but tense. 5 people sat in a loose circle of folding chairs and a worn leather couch. Coffee mugs, tissues, and photo albums littered the nearby table. Nobody smiled when they saw us. This is Jesse Reynolds, Lorraine said, and this is Will Marsh. A pause, then an older man with square shoulders and a buzz cut nodded once. I'm Mark Thompson, Ashley's father. My throat tightened. To his left sat a woman with graying curls and thick glasses, Rachel Marsh's mother. Will froze for a second. She reached out and gave his hand a soft squeeze. There were 2 others, Mrs. Carver's sister, and a man named Tom who lost his niece in the trip. No one here was looking for drama. They had the hollow expressions of people who stopped pretending everything was fine a long time ago. Mark spoke first. We don't do this often. Once a year, mostly to remind each other we're not insane, or to share the latest conspiracy the internet spits out. He looked at me. But Lorraine says you've got something new. I sat down and pulled out my phone. The photos, the shipping label, the binder with Ashley's handwriting. I passed it around. Then Will added the email he'd received, and finally the flash drive with the flight logs and travel records. No one said a word for almost 10 minutes. Then Rachel's mother, Alice, whispered, so they weren't all dead. Will cleared his throat, or not all at once. A silence heavier than any I'd ever felt settled in the room. They told us, Lorraine began, her voice fragile, that the bus may have gone off the cliff, that they didn't have enough evidence for a full investigation, that without bodies there was nothing to recover. They said closure would come with time, muttered Mark, but time only made it worse. He stood, walked to a bookshelf in the corner, and pulled out a thick folder. Inside were police reports, newspaper clippings, emails from the school district, and dozens of pages of typed notes. After year 5, we started noticing things, he said. The school changed their story. First, they said the trip was organized by the district. Then they said it was through a third-party agency, but no one could give us the name. The teachers who were supposed to chaperone Carver and Nolan weren't even on the school payroll anymore by then. One had retired early. The other disappeared. Alice added there was no rental record for the charter bus. The license plate was registered to a defunct transport company in Nevada. Every time we asked questions, someone shrugged or said the paperwork was lost. And the school counselor who coordinated everything, Lorraine said, left town the day after the trip, never came back, not even to collect her last paycheck. Will leaned forward, gripping his knees. You think this was planned? Mark shook his head. I don't think it, I know it. He handed us a photo, a copy of a yearbook page with a sticky note attached. Senior trip committee, Ashley, Caleb, Rachel, Thomas, Megan, 5 kids, all missing. And a 6th name I hadn't noticed. Catherine Halsey, school counselor. Except her photo wasn't from the yearbook. It was a cropped driver's license image, and below it in red ink, now goes by, Karen Holtz, last seen boarding a flight to Lima, Peru, July 2005. What happened to her? I asked. She vanished. The police said she'd quit, left a note on her desk, but someone spotted her in LA in 2007, then again in Panama City in 2010, always just ahead of the trail. Alice's voice was almost a whisper. We think she knows where they went. Will looked at me. I knew that look. We were already thinking the same thing. He turned to the group. We need to find her. Mark folded his arms. She doesn't want to be found. Maybe not, I said, but we're not looking for her. We're looking for them. That's when Lorraine said it, the thing none of us were ready for, but all of us needed to hear. Ashley's suitcase, she said slowly. It didn't just show up in Bogota. We turned to her. It was sent there. She passed me a copy of the shipment receipt. Will grabbed it first, eyes scanning every line. It was dropped off at a courier office in Austin, Texas, 4 days before it arrived in Colombia. No sender name, paid in cash. My hands felt cold. Why Austin? I asked. Because, Lorraine said, a year before the trip, Catherine Halsey lived there, and I think she's still connected to someone here. We were no longer chasing ghosts. We were chasing someone real. And the trail was warming up fast. Austin was hotter than I remembered. Not just the weather, the kind of heat that clings to your skin and makes you question every decision you've made that brought you outside. Will and I arrived just after noon, driving straight from the airport to a neighborhood that felt like it had been built overnight. Prefab apartments, chain restaurants, coffee shops with ironic names and expensive iced lattes. But this wasn't where Catherine Halsey used to live. We were going further back. The address Lorraine gave us led to an older part of East Austin. The houses here were small, most of them single-story with peeling paint, chain-link fences, and porch swings that hadn't moved in years. It felt like a different city altogether, one that hadn't caught up to the skyline. We pulled up in front of a faded blue house with a rusted mailbox and a dying rose bush out front, 1214 Birch Lane. According to a public records search, Catherine Halsey rented this house from 2003 to 2005, right up until she took the job at Rockford High. It had been vacant for years. We got out of the car, not really sure what we were expecting, maybe a neighbor who remembered her, maybe mail still addressed to her name. I knocked on the door out of habit. The windows were covered with grime. No answer, of course. Let's check the back, Will said. We walked along the side of the house. Overgrown weeds brushed our legs. Behind the house was a half-collapsed wooden shed and, surprisingly, an old swing set, the kind with rusted chains and faded plastic seats. A child's shoe sat half-buried near the base of the slide. Jess, Will said, calling me over. He stood in front of the shed, holding something in his hands, a cracked piece of luggage tag, almost entirely worn away, but still faintly legible. In black ink, M. Carver. My stomach dropped. She kept some of it here, I whispered. We didn't get much time to think. A voice behind us made us jump. You looking for the woman who used to live here? We turned. An older woman stood across the fence, arms crossed over a faded t-shirt, a plastic bag of groceries hanging from her wrist. I used to live across the street, she said, eyeing us. Saw your car, recognized the house. I walked over. Did you know her? The woman nodded slowly. Catherine, quiet, kind, but nervous, always looked over her shoulder like someone might come looking. When was the last time you saw her? Will asked. The woman thought for a moment. Few weeks before she moved out, I was at the bus stop down the block. She pulled up in a beat-up sedan and opened the trunk. Had a bunch of duffel bags in the back. Teenage kids with her, 3 or 4 of them, looked scared. My mouth went dry. What did they look like? I asked. Young, 17 maybe. One of them had a broken arm, wrapped in a sling. A girl with curly hair was crying. Another kept saying, it's not safe here, it's not safe here. And Catherine kept telling them to hurry up. Did you call the police? Will asked, already knowing the answer. No, she said, regret in her voice. Didn't seem like a kidnapping, more like they were running from something. One of the boys waved at me when they drove off. I reached into my bag, pulled out the yearbook copy we brought, and handed it to her. She stared at the photos, then her finger landed on one. That's the girl, the one with the curly hair. I looked Rachel Marsh. Then another. Him too, with the sling. Caleb Bishop. They were alive, at least for a while, in Austin, with Catherine. Will took out his notebook, scribbling furiously. Do you remember the car, the license plate? She shook her head, no plate, but there was a sticker on the bumper, a butterfly, orange and yellow. Will looked at me. That's the logo for Monarch Outreach. I frowned. What is that? Private Youth Shelter Network. Operates in border states. Mostly deals with displaced or runaway teens. You think she hid them there? He nodded, or used their system to smuggle them somewhere else. We thanked the woman and returned to the car, heads spinning. The leads were lining up too neatly. The travel records, the suitcases, the names, the fragments. They were here, I said, and not by accident. Will leaned against the car, wiping sweat from his brow. Catherine staged the disappearance. Maybe even with help, the bus never crashed. They split off somewhere, vanished into a plan that was already in motion. But why, I whispered, to save them from what? We didn't have the answer, not yet. But we had a new direction, Monarch Outreach. And somewhere inside that network, the rest of the story was waiting. We found the old Monarch Outreach website through a web archive. The official domain had been inactive since 2009, but buried beneath outdated HTML and broken image links was a map, a scatter of dots marking each of their youth support centers across the southwestern United States. Most were listed as closed. All but one's. Las Cruces, New Mexico. Status temporarily inactive. No phone number, no website, no staff listings. Will leaned back from his laptop and rubbed his eyes. That's not normal, even for a shuttered nonprofit. You don't just leave a database active for a location unless someone's still watching it. So we go, I said. He looked at me. That's a 10-hour drive. Then we leave tonight. We arrived in Las Cruces just after sunrise. The sky was pale orange, the desert stretching endlessly around us like we'd driven off the edge of the country. The address from the website led us down a cracked, dusty road just outside the city. A faded sign on a chain-link fence read, Monarch Outreach Youth Transition Services. Closed to public, no trespassing. The building behind it looked like an abandoned school, 2 stories, stucco walls weathered by sand, boarded-up windows, and a sagging roof. But someone had been there recently. Fresh tire tracks curled around the side of the building, and a soda can sat on the front steps. We'll cut the engine and scan the perimeter. You thinking what I'm thinking? That we're not the first ones to come looking. No, he said, that someone never left. We approached the side entrance. The main doors were chained shut. We'll jimmied a rusted back gate open with a crowbar from the trunk. Inside, the air was thick with dust and heat. The place smelled like mildew and stale insulation, but more than that, it smelled lived in. We moved cautiously down the hallway. Graffiti-covered parts of the wall, old posters, never give up, you matter, peeled at the corners. I passed a corkboard still pinned with laminated name cards, Daniel, Simone, Elena, Noah. Then I stopped, my breath caught. A 5th card, Rachel. I pulled it down. On the back was a scribbled date, 8/22/2005. 2 months after the senior trip. Will came beside me. They were here. We pressed deeper into the building, past counseling rooms, dorm-style bedrooms, a cafeteria with flipped tables. In what used to be an office, we found a file cabinet, locked. Will pried it open with the crowbar. Inside, there were dozens of folders, mostly empty. One was labeled, Special Cases, Outside Referral Only. He handed it to me. I opened it. Names, photos, some of the kids from our class, all tagged placement confirmed or transferred, but no details, just coded destinations. Facility A, Program M, off-grid unit approved. My hands were shaking. This was organized, I whispered, like a relocation program. Will frowned, but who approved it, who funded it, the state, private donors. I don't think this was legal at all. We heard it then, footsteps. We froze. A door creaked open somewhere down the hall. Will killed his flashlight. We ducked behind the desk just as someone entered the room, boots scraping against the tile. I held my breaths. A male voice, low, calm, practiced, spoke softly, like to himself. Should have boarded it up sooner. People always come back. He stood just feet from us. We saw only his silhouette, tall, lean, wearing a baseball cap pulled low. He walked to the file cabinet, opened it, noticed the missing folder, swore under his breath. And then he left. We waited 5 full minutes before we moved. When we stepped outside, the truck he'd arrived in was already kicking up dust in the distance. Will looked at me. He knew someone might come. And he didn't seem surprised, I added. We returned to the car. Will scanned the file folder again. One name stood out now, typed at the bottom of a transfer sheet. Authorized by K. Halsey. She was here, I said. She built this part of the plan, and she didn't do it alone. Will pulled something else from the folder, a list of external partners. Most were codes or abbreviations, but one jumped out at me. CIR Delta operates offshore transitional services. He looked it up on his phone. They ran a boat charter program for troubled youth, counseling at sea, started in 2004, ended in 2006, out of service now. Where? He swallowed. Key West, Florida. A strange stillness settled between us. From California to Austin to New Mexico. And now the trail pointed to the ocean. I thought of the suitcases, of Ashley's handwriting, of Rachel crying in the car. Wherever they were sent, it wasn't just a disappearance. It was a relocation, an erasure. And if we followed this trail any further, we might be the next ones to vanish. Key West smelled like sunscreen, salt, and overpriced cocktails, but the glossy postcard version of the town barely touched the place we came to see. The CIR Delta dock was rusted over and half submerged, tucked behind a private marina on the south end of the island. We found it listed in old maritime records as a youth recovery charter service, but there were no public mentions of its closure. No lawsuits, no announcements, just silence, like the company had evaporated without a trace. But someone remembered them. A man named Peter Gaines. Former deckhand, registered employee of CIR Delta from 2004 to 2006. We found him listed on an archived business insurance claim after a mechanical failure at sea. With some digging and a well-placed call from Will to a buddy in Florida Public Records, we got a current address. He lived in Marathon, about an hour up the highway, in a modest house on stilts, right against the marsh. When he answered the door, he didn't look surprised, just tired. "You're here about the kids," he said. "Not a question." "Yes," I replied, "Rockford High, 2005. He sighed, figured someone would come eventually. He let us in. The place was cluttered but clean. Stacks of old boating logs, a radio scanning static in the corner, framed photos turned face down on a shelf. Most people collect memories. Peter had buried his. "I don't talk about that time anymore," he said, pouring coffee into two mismatched mugs. "But I will today. Just one thing, we don't do it here." I hesitated. "You want to meet somewhere else?" He shook his head. "I want to meet somewhere no one can listen. No water nearby, no boats, somewhere I can see every exit." We drove 2 hours inland. An abandoned parking lot behind an old citrus plant. We sat in the car with the windows down, the humid air clinging to our skin. Peter lit a cigarette with shaking hands, then he spoke. "They brought them in the middle of the night," he began. 3 vans, no markings, about a dozen teenagers, no parents, no luggage, except for one medical crate with bandages and a defibrillator. I felt a chill roll up my arms. There were 3 girls, the rest boys. They looked drugged, not like high, like medicated, blank eyes. One of them threw up before stepping onto the boat. Will leaned forward. "What was the program for?" Peter took a drag. "They told us it was a recovery transition. Kids taken from abusive households, trauma cases. We were to keep them offshore for 6 to 8 weeks. Counseling, manual work, no electronics, no contact with the outside world." He shook his head. "But they weren't recovering, they were hiding." "Hiding from what?" I asked. He met my eyes. "From who?" He tapped his chest. "They were scared, of something bigger than home. Not one of them asked when they could leave. They only asked who knew where they were. That was the first red flag." "And the second?" Will asked. "One of them jumped ship on day 6, swam in the dark. We never found him. The director, a woman named Halsey, said nothing, just logged it as incident resolved." My heart pounded. "Halsey was there?" I asked. Peter nodded. "She ran the whole thing, but not like staff, more like a guardian, like she'd chosen them. She had a binder with every one of their names, and the title on the cover said Clearwater Transition, Phase 2. "What happened at the end of the 6 weeks?" Will asked. Peter looked away. They didn't come back with us. Another boat arrived, bigger, unmarked, no crew visible. We were told to leave the area for 4 hours and return later. When we did, the kids were gone, so was Halsey. I couldn't breathe for a moment. And no one questioned this, I asked, my voice rising. Peter exhaled. We were paid well, off the books. All of us were in debt, one way or another. They picked desperate people for a reason. He took another drag. 3 months later, CIR Delta shut down. The boats were sold, staff scattered, and I started having panic attacks any time I got near the ocean. He looked at me then, straight through me. I don't know what they were running from, but it was organized, funded, protected. You don't disappear that many kids without help. Will showed him the list, the transfer codes, the facility names, the signatures. Peter studied them silently, then pointed to a name. Facility M, Phase 3 intake approved. Location, unknown. That was the final destination, he said. I heard them call it the Meadow once, but I don't know what that means. He handed the paper back. You want answers, you'll have to find Halsey. But be careful, people like her don't go off the grid unless someone's paying to keep them there. As we drove back toward the coast, I sat in silence, my mind racing. The class of 2005 didn't just disappear. They were taken. They were hidden. And someone made damn sure we'd never find where. Until now. We drove north that night, tired and wired, passing gas stations and shuttered diners along US Route 1. The road hummed under the tires while my thoughts screamed louder. Will had his laptop open on his lap. Despite the flickering motel Wi-Fi, he was digging through whatever financial records he could access, grant databases, foundation directories, 990 tax filings for defunct nonprofits. He worked like a man possessed. Somewhere around 2 a.m., he sat up straighter. Jess, I found something. I leaned over. On the screen was a financial disclosure from Clearwater Youth Initiatives, the umbrella name for what had once included Monarch Outreach and, apparently, CIR Delta. Buried in the fine print of the 2004-2006 filings was a single donor who appeared repeatedly, across every branch and project. Dr. Eli Carver. Carver, I said, as in. Marilyn Carver's brother, Will confirmed, the teacher who disappeared with your class. I blinked. She never mentioned having a brother. She wouldn't have, he said. He was disbarred from medical research in 2002. Will pulled up a news article, archived and dusty with age. The headline read, NIH investigator resigns amid ethics probe into unapproved psychological trials. The article claimed that Dr. Eli Carver, a well-regarded neuroscientist and behaviorist, had resigned from a federally funded project after whistleblowers alleged he was conducting off-protocol psychological isolation studies involving minors from disadvantaged and trauma-prone backgrounds. Jesus, I whispered. The allegations never went to court. He vanished from academia, no charges filed, and then silence. Guess who helped fund his last recorded project? Will said, scrolling. Clearwater, I answered, already knowing. $3 million, rooted through a behavioral transition foundation based in Delaware, all tied to offshore accounts and shell orgs, everything scrubbed. So this wasn't just about relocation, I said. This was about experimentation. Will nodded grimly. They didn't vanish. They were selected. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Ashley, Caleb, Rachel, our friends. They weren't just hidden away for their protection. They were placed into something designed, structured, and monitored. And if Carver was behind it? What kind of experiments? I asked, dreading the answer. Behavioral isolation, identity reset. There's mention of group psychometric drift analysis. That's when you put a group in total isolation with manipulated social structures and observe how they evolve beliefs, memory, roles. He believed trauma survivors were ideal subjects. My stomach turned. He clicked on one last file, a blurry scan of a manifest marked, Phase 3 arrival, Meadow Facility intake, August 2006. The top was redacted, but one name was not. Ashley Thompson. I stared at it like it might disappear. She made it, I whispered. At least that far, Will said. There was an address in the margin, not a proper one. Coordinates, northern latitude, Montana range. Looks like the facility S in the mountains, Will said. Remote, isolated, perfect for a group no one's supposed to find. "We're going," I said. He looked at me. "It's government land, wilderness. If it still exists, it's not on any map." I stared at the screen. My heart felt like it was burning through my chest. They spent 10 years hiding what happened to us. They built a system to erase their names. But they forgot one thing. I looked at Will. "We remember. We flew to Helena under fake names. Not because we were fugitives, but because we didn't know who might be watching, and at this point, it was safer to assume someone was." The coordinates led us deep into the Beartooth Mountains, an unforgiving stretch of wilderness that looked beautiful on postcards but could kill you without breaking a sweat. We rented a jeep, packed rations, and hiked the last leg on foot. No trails, no markers, just satellite maps, tree lines, and the rising pressure of something neither of us could name. I hadn't slept properly in days. My body moved out of stubbornness, not strength. Will led the way. He was quiet, focused, but I could tell this was affecting him more than he let on. We camped one night under a grove of pines, and somewhere around 2 a.m., I heard him whisper to the dark, "I used to dream that Rachel wasn't dead. Now I'm starting to hope she is, because if she's not." He didn't finish. The coordinates landed us at the edge of a high valley. A clearing opened between the trees like the earth had been carved by careful hands. And there it was. The meadow. It wasn't a name, it was literal, a flat, grassy field surrounded by dense woods. In the middle stood a cluster of modular buildings, now weathered and mostly collapsed, portable shelters, shipping container structures. One of them had solar panels still attached, dangling like broken wings. We stood in silence. They'd been here, all of them. Will moved first, stepping carefully over cracked concrete and scattered metal. A rusted sign on the ground read, "Facility M Private, no entry." We searched every room we could access. Some still had beds. One had a whiteboard, its ink faded but legible under flashlight. Scribbled names: Ashley, Caleb, Rachel, Thomas, Megan. Next to each name were dates, tasks, roles. Leader, healer, cook, mediator, silent. And then below it all, in someone's handwriting, a child's maybe, the words, "We are not who we were." I felt my knees weaken. One of the side buildings had a locked panel built into the floor. We'll pried it open with a rusted crowbar. Inside, a hatch, a staircase. We descended into a basement-level bunker, cold and windowless. The air smelled like mold and regret. And in the far back room, there it was. A message, written in thick black paint across the concrete wall. "If you found this, it means we failed to become who they wanted. But at least we survived each other." Below it were symbols, dates, and 5 fingerprints in red pressed into the wall like a blood pact. I traced my fingers over the one in the center. "Ashley was here," I said softly. They all were. Will stepped back, staring at the wall like it might come alive. "There's no equipment," he said. "No logs, no records. They stripped this place before they left." I nodded because they didn't want anyone knowing this was more than a project. He turned to me. "Jess, I think they got out." I stared at him. "This doesn't feel like a grave," he continued. "It feels like a goodbye. They didn't just survive, they escaped." "But where did they go?" I asked. Will pointed to the wall. "One of those dates, it's 2 months after this facility was supposed to be shut down. That means someone stayed longer than they were supposed to, maybe left a trail." We searched again, and this time we found it. In a rusted locker, beneath a floor panel, a sealed envelope wrapped in plastic. Inside was a photo. 5 people standing in front of what looked like a remote bus station, all older, changed, but recognizable. Ashley, Rachel, Caleb, Megan. And someone else we didn't know. On the back, written in Ashley's handwriting, "We took our names back. We never let go of each other. If you're reading this, we hope you remember who we were. We hope you don't remember what they tried to make us." Will clutched the photo to his chest. I stood there in the quiet of the meadow that wasn't quiet anymore, feeling the earth shift beneath my feet. They were alive. They got out. And somewhere out there, they were waiting for the world to forget. But I couldn't. Not now, not ever. We didn't speak much on the way back. There are things you find that change your life, and then there are things that change you. Discovering the meadow had done both. The photo, the writing, the fingerprints on the wall, we had confirmation now, not just of survival, but of resistance. They didn't vanish. They were taken. But they fought back. We left Montana with the photo sealed tight in a waterproof envelope, packed between layers of clothes in Will's backpack. I carried copies of everything else, the transfer files, the logs, the funding documents with Eli Carver's name. We agreed to upload everything to cloud storage the moment we had signal again. We never got the chance. It started small, a missing tire pressure cap on the Jeep, then a sudden police stop 10 miles outside Billings, where the officer claimed our plates were flagged for vehicle code inconsistencies. He let us go, but not before glancing into the backseat with too much interest. By the time we reached the motel, our room had been tossed. Nothing stolen, nothing broken, but everything moved, toothbrushes switched sides, laptop cord coiled in the wrong direction, just enough to say, "We see you. We know what you found. Turn back." I wanted to run, Will wanted to fight. We compromised. We'd get to a secure location, his friend in Denver who worked in digital forensics and transfer everything. Then we'd figure out the next move. But someone moved first. We were an hour outside Cheyenne when the black SUV started tailing us. No lights, no plates, kept exactly 4 car lengths behind, never more, never less. We tried to lose it, gas station detours, a fake right onto an off-ramp, but it stuck to us like a shadow. Will didn't panic, he just drove faster, quieter. "Who do you think it is?" I asked. He didn't answer, just said, "I think they've been watching since Austin, maybe before." Then the SUV dropped back. I turned around in time to see it veer off into an exit and disappear. But it wasn't relief I felt, it was dread. Because whoever they were, they didn't need to follow us anymore. They already knew where we were going. We made it to Denver by nightfall. Will's friend Eric let us in through the side gate of his apartment building, a wiry, fast-talking coder who lived in a haze of coffee and paranoia. He didn't ask many questions, which made him perfect. Within an hour, he had everything backed up, encrypted, and mirrored to 4 international servers. "Even if they burn your laptop in a parking lot," he said, "the truth lives." I finally exhaled. Until we stepped out the front door the next morning and found Eric's car, doors open, glove box shredded, and a USB stick melted into the cup holder. They hadn't just searched it. They sent a message. "I don't get it," Will said as we drove away. "We're not whistleblowers, we're nobodies. What are they so afraid of?" I turned toward him. "They're not afraid of us," I said. "They're afraid of what we can prove, of who we can reach." He went quiet. The car fell into a silence that felt like strategy. That night I received another email. No subject line, no signature, no sender. Just 2 words. "You're next." Attached was a single image. A photo of me outside the motel in Montana, backpack on, Will beside me, taken from behind a pine tree. They'd been closer than we thought. I showed it to Will without a word. He stared at it, jaw tight, then said, "We have to disappear." "No," I said, "we have to finish this." He looked at me like I was mad. "Jess, they've already followed us across state lines. They've broken into cars, rooms, they know who you are." "I don't care." I held up the photograph we found in the meadow, the 5 kids, my friends, standing in front of that station. They survived everything, and they still had the courage to leave a message. I'm not letting that go. Will finally nodded, then we release it, all of it, name names, tell their stories. But we don't do it through the press, not yet. We do it ourselves. How? He gave a slow, dangerous smile. We start with the class of 2005. The plan was simple: reach out to every family member we could find, the siblings, the cousins, the parents who never stopped asking questions. Then share everything, the documents, the locations, the faces. We'd make sure they carried the truth too, spread thin, across the country, impossible to silence. Because they could follow us, threaten us. But they couldn't erase all of us. Not again. It started with a phone call from a number I didn't recognize, area code from Oregon. I let it go to voicemail. Whoever it was didn't leave a message. Then they called again. And again. On the fourth try, I answered. Hello. There was a pause. Then a voice, male, quiet, cautious, but trembling in a way that felt deeply familiar. Jesse. I froze. I don't know if you remember me, he said, but I remember you. I was on that bus. My name was Thomas Harper. I almost dropped the phone. Thomas, I whispered. I don't go by that name anymore, haven't in years, but I saw your post, the one you shared with the other families. Someone forwarded it to me. I could barely breathe. Will turned to look at me, eyes wide. I mouthed the words. It's him. Thomas continued. I don't know what you're planning or who you've talked to, but if you're serious about finding out what happened, I'll talk. One time, but only face to face. And only you. Where? I asked. There was another pause, then he said, Crescent Cove, Northern California, you remember it. I did. It was where our class stopped for gas and lunch, just before heading into Yosemite, where the trail ended. He said there's a bench at the Overlook. Tomorrow, 5 p.m. come alone. Leave everything behind, laptop, phone, car. If they're watching you, this won't work. Before I could say anything else, the line went dead. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did Will. He paced the motel room like a soldier before a mission. He didn't like the setup, didn't like that I'd go alone, but he understood. If this was real, if Thomas Harper, one of the missing seniors, was alive, then this was the break we'd been chasing for weeks. This could be a trap, Will said. They could have used your message as bait. I know. But if it's real, he added, then he's the key. I packed a single bag, left my phone in a locker at a Greyhound station, took the long route, bus, walk, rideshare. I crossed state lines quietly, watching every reflection, every shadow, trusting no one. When I reached Crescent Cove, the air smelled like salt and redwood bark. The old Overlook was still there, a wooden bench facing the Pacific, sun setting low on the horizon like something out of memory. He was already sitting there. Older, leaner, wearing a hooded jacket and a low-brimmed cap, but his posture was the same. Thomas had always slouched slightly, like he was trying to disappear into himself. When he saw me, he stood. Jesse. I wanted to hug him, cry, ask 1,000 questions, but I didn't, not yet. He motioned for me to sit. Then, without turning, he said, You're not supposed to be here. You called me. He nodded. I did because you deserve the truth, because they never told you, because none of us could. I swallowed. Ashley, Rachel, Caleb, are they alive? A long silence. Then a slow nod. They were when we left the meadow. We made it out together. Where did you go? He hesitated. We scattered, new names, new lives, no contact. That was the rule. We couldn't risk being found, not by them, not by him. Carver, I said. His jaw tightened. He didn't just design the system. He lived in it, observed us like rats in a cage. Every interaction we had, every argument, breakdown, moment of connection was data. I was the conflict subject. Rachel was the moral center. Ashley, she was the outlier, the one who didn't break. I felt tears rising in my throat. What happened to her? He looked out toward the ocean. She bought us time when the second phase collapsed. When the staff started pulling out, she led the resistance, got us through the final weeks. And when the escape happened, she didn't come with us. My heart stopped. She stayed. He nodded. She said someone had to erase the tracks, someone had to stall them. I covered my mouth. She gave us our lives back. But we had to erase her to keep them. Thomas turned to me then, really looked at me. I don't know where she is now. None of us do. Maybe she made it out, maybe not. But I know this, if she knew you were looking. She'd come back. He handed me something. A photo. Ashley, older, wearing a gray sweater, standing outside what looked like a bus depot in New Mexico, hair longer, face more defined, but it was her. When was this taken? I asked. 3 years ago, someone sent it to me anonymously. No note, just the image. I stared at it, hands trembling. She's out there, I whispered. Thomas stood. You have more enemies than you know. If you're going to keep digging, you need to stop thinking like a friend and start thinking like someone who was in the cage. He turned to go. I called after him. Thomas, why now? Why tell me? He paused. Because I remember who you were. And because if anyone can bring her home, it's you. Then he walked away, disappearing into the tree line, leaving only the wind and the weight of everything he didn't say. I didn't go home right away. I stayed in Crescent Cove that night, watching the tide creep over the rocks beneath the overlook where Thomas had vanished. I replayed every word, every pause, every flicker in his voice. He wasn't lying, not because he couldn't, but because whatever he'd lived through had long since crushed the need to pretend. Ashley had stayed behind. To protect them. To protect all of us. And yet, she was still out there. The photo Thomas gave me haunted me. Ashley standing outside a remote bus terminal in the desert, hair windblown, eyes alert, older, yes, but still unmistakably her. In the corner of the image, barely visible, was a reflection in the window behind her, a sign, Desert Pines Medical Center. It didn't show up on any official listings. But when I called a Navajoran health outpost in the New Mexico desert and asked, gently, vaguely, if they'd ever had a volunteer named Ashley, the voice on the other end went quiet, then said, "We don't confirm who comes through, but people find peace out here." That's all I'll say. That was all I needed. I didn't tell Will. I left him a note, encrypted copies of everything, and a single line. If I don't come back, you know where to start. 2 days later, I was standing on the edge of the painted desert, miles from cell service, blinking against the sun. I didn't bring my phone, no camera, no map, just the photo, just hope. The health outpost was barely more than a trailer and a covered porch. A nurse greeted me kindly but warily. She asked no questions, offered water, let me sit and wait. After an hour, she said, she walks at sunset, East Ridge, every day. I didn't ask for more. I followed the path across the scrubland, where the dust clung to my shoes and the air shimmered like memory. The sun dipped low, that golden hour where time feels like it's holding its breath. And then I saw her, sitting on a stone outcropping, facing the endless horizon. Still calm, alive. Ashley, I said. She didn't turn right away. Then slowly she looked over her shoulder. Our eyes met. And for a moment, the last 20 years collapsed into nothing. Jess, she said softly, a half-smile forming, took you long enough. I fell to my knees beside her, tears I didn't even feel spilling down my cheeks. She didn't hug me, she didn't cry. She just looked at me like someone who had spent years in silence, and finally, found the one person who could understand it. We talked until the stars came out. She told me everything, what it was like after the meadow, the months of evasion, the false identities, the fear, the strength it took not to look back. She told me about the others, too. Rachel, Caleb, Megan, all alive, all still hidden, all still afraid. Why didn't you come home? I asked. She looked up at the stars. Because home was gone, because the world that let it happen never deserved our return. I nodded. But you're here, she added, and you brought the story with you. I'm going to tell it, I said, all of it. I know. She reached into her pocket and handed me a folded piece of paper, yellowed, soft at the edges, a letter, signed by every one of them, a promise. We are not missing. We are just choosing to live. And if the world ever looks for us again, tell them this. We survived what they created. We became more than their data. We became each other. I left the desert 3 days later. I never said goodbye, just looked at Ashley one last time, standing at the ridge as the sun rose behind her, and knew. Some stories aren't meant to end. Some just wait to be remembered. The story of the class of 2005 was never solved. But now it can no longer be ignored. And somewhere out there, in quiet places far from cameras and concrete, the ones who refused to disappear still walk, not as victims, not as ghosts, but as survivors, who took back their lives. And finally, found peace.